So welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to day 2 of OpenSlava. If you just joined in, this is day 2 of OpenSlava 2021. And if you joined us yesterday, welcome back, because this is the day a lot of you have been waiting for. Yesterday was all about business, was like, how can we get that mindset to move the business forward? And today we're going to deep dive. We're going to build stuff. We're going to talk about Google, AWS, Kubernetes. We're going to code. We're going to do a live stuff. And I'm really looking forward. Why? Because you probably already see it on the screen. But this year, we have 2 streams. So I have been programming, have been putting him in the cloud for some time now. And I thought this is the 9th edition of OpenSlava. So it's finally time to bring him out, my latest AI. And he will be hosting stream number 2. Ladies and gentlemen, give him a big digital applause with your clapping hands. Jan Godelik.
Hello, my name is Jano. Or when I program to speak normally? Hi.
Yeah. Normally everything should be fine.
Thanks for bringing me to life. I'm so happy. If they implanted some feelings inside me, I'm sure I would feel them now.
There you go. I'm really looking for. Are you excited to be hosting in this OpenSlava? Because it's your first time, right, at OpenSlava?
Yes, it is. I'm actually. I looked at some of your videos from yesterday. I'm actually figuring out what to do here, and because I love computers, and I always was into computers. I was just showing somebody my modem, which I bought in like 1992, and that was my first start with computers. But this, what we are going to talk about today, is the limit where my knowledge reaches. So it's like AWS and Kubernetes and all this is like, okay, I heard those words, and I'm really looking forward to get into that and listen to the shows and then see the live coding, because I don't know what to expect, and I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, well, what I most of the time do, I've been doing this for 5 years now, is just nod, look really smart, and then just repeat the things they say, but with a question mark. And then it sounds like you actually know what they're talking about.
So example, like, and now we're gonna push all this into a Git, and the machine should restart itself. And then you go.
There you go, and exactly that. And then you put it in a container, but you have to watch out for the architecture and the infrastructure, because if the microservices aren't working in the cloud, the AWS will not send feedback to the transfer loop.
So the architecture and the infrastructure is really important, right?
There you go. And then
okay, so this is how we do it.
And just put it in the AI. It's a bit like that, but you are totally ready for this event. And if I'm looking at the timing, Jan, I'm probably not going to see you maybe at the end of the day, but I'm not going to see you because I'll be in my own stream. So for the people watching, we will both have our stream, and you'll probably go back and forth between. So give Jan a very warm welcome if you're now going to stream 2. Jan, I'm going to leave it here. This whole room is up to you.
Oh, wonderful.
Great. There you go. And I'm going to move now to my room. And for the people that are joining me in stream 1, I will see you in a second. Have fun.
Thank you, Marnik. It was a pleasure meeting you. Bye-bye. See you later. Hey guys, welcome to feed number 2 or B. I don't know how you call them, whatever. Welcome. The day 2 is ready to start. If you're watching us right now on YouTube or Facebook or anywhere else, consider joining us on the virtual show floor, which is much better. You just register, because we have some late registrations open at openslava.sk. Go to that website, register yourself, and probably Linda here will let you in 30 minutes. We told her she has 30 minutes to let you in. So if you fill out your form, she's the one who will accept it. And then you can join the virtual floor, where you can speak to other members. You can see the guys. There's like walking pictures of people with their avatars as their faces. You can join the cocktail mood bar. I don't know how that works. Yeah. The AI is going to look at your face and think of a drink which will mix it for you based on your how you feel. So you can try that. And you can join the treasure hunt. You will be hunting and then collecting some items, and you have a chance to win Nintendo Switch, which is a gaming console. And you will see the activities which you have to finish to acquire the badge for getting into the competition for the Nintendo Switch. I'm looking forward to that. So join us at openslava.sk. The registration will take about 30 minutes, and then you can join the virtual floor, which is really cool. Now, we don't have much time, and I don't want to eat time from the next speaker. So we will start and with the Siemens Healthineers, which are like really cool guys. They are doing IT here in Slovakia. They're doing beautiful things with the huge Siemens machines, which can do monitoring, which can do scans, and they do AI, and they do really cool stuff here in Slovakia. And one of them, his name is Filip Mrocek. He will tell us about technical depth and about switching technologies. Is he here? Can I speak to him now? Filip?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, perfectly. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. I'm a bit feeling a bit sick, but I hope I can make it.
Is it the word which nobody wants to mention?
No, I'm pretty sure it's not.
Okay, so tell us about the Healthineers. What do you do in Slovakia? Because I heard you do like serious IT here.
Yeah, we do serious IT. That's true. We actually do a bunch of
The connection
interesting stuff. It's not only. Can you?
Yes,
hear
I
me
can hear
well
you.
or not?
Now, yes.
Okay. Hopefully that holds. So we do a lot of cool stuff. Not only software development, but also artificial intelligence. You mentioned something with shaking cocktails. So this is similar, but according to your healthcare, it's actually much more interesting. Not only shaking.
Yeah, I heard about something. You do the MRI and MRI scans, and then you can like look into the scans and help doctor figure out what's happening in the picture. Is that correct?
Exactly. Yes,
Wow.
but we have a lot of projects here.
That is really cool. But you are the Scrum Master, team facilitator, and I think you will tell us something more about how to manage all the things that you are trying to achieve, and how to keep it in these boxes so they don't fly out, and how somehow like keep the versions in their different pockets, and so that everybody knows what they're doing. Is that correct? Something like that, right?
Exactly. Kind of, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, I'm looking forward to this presentation. Ladies and gentlemen, Filip Mrocek.
Thank you very much. I will share my screen now. Hopefully you see now my PowerPoint. So I would like to tell you about how have we switched core technologies in live product development. So at first, let me do some short introduction. Jan already mentioned something about our company, but just to wrap it up, Siemens Healthineers worldwide has more than 50,000 employees. Basically, the main idea is that we design and manufacture healthcare devices, but in Slovakia, we mostly focus on medical software development. Few words about myself. So I've studied software engineering and artificial intelligence in Bratislava. I joined the company 4 years ago, and currently I'm a Scrum Master and team facilitator on one of our projects. So let me tell you a story about what we did and how we liked it. So first, I would like to share some context with you of what that product is about and how actually we develop. It's important to understand then why we decided to do what we did. So basically, we have a global development setup. That means that our developers are located on multiple sites in 2 countries, Slovakia and Austria. We have currently 6 Scrum teams. That is more than 35 developers who actively develop the product. And since Corona times, we are basically remote anyway, but even before pandemics, we had to be remote because most of our colleagues are located on different places than Bratislava. And what was the initial state? So basically, when our team or my team joined some 2 years ago, we only had 20 developers who worked on the project, and we still use the SVN, so Subversion, for a source code control. Back then, we still used Sencha XJS as a main JavaScript framework, and we have been using the Tomcat and Liferay as a backend solution for managing basically all the backend stuff. okay, what does it mean, or what were the challenges basically of this setup? So this global development bring global challenges, and one of them was that the technological debt grew over time. So basically, the product started some 15 years ago, and perhaps back then SVN and XJS maybe were good choices, but they became obsolete over time. The problem was that it was not just some technology, but it was basically core technology. So it's definitely harder to upgrade, um, let's say, source code control, source code tool than some just upgrading some minor version of the framework. Basically, we have quite demanding customers, which means that we just cannot do a release drop, for instance, to fix some issues from the past, to maybe fix some technological debt. But we have to be very careful about what what the market will say. Also, our product was partly used by other teams, let's say, so we had external dependencies, and some parts of the code base were shared among multiple projects. Basically, that means that we had some common libraries that are used on multiple projects, like, for instance, the DICOM viewer. That is pretty interesting piece of library, so it makes sense to have only one library like that and have it shared among the projects. But for us to switch from SVN to, for instance, Git wasn't so easy because all the other dependencies had to switch as well. So we had to coordinate. And at the same time, you know how it is when people are used to doing something in some way, and then after years, you come and say that maybe the old way isn't the best anymore, and that you should maybe switch to something more up to date. People are quite careful about those changes, and you also need to gain some trust of people to actually make them feel comfortable with this change. So what were the ideas, or what solutions we thought of? So one solution of from switching the SVN to Git was to do the hard cut, basically. So we thought, okay, let's just communicate to the customers that we will bring no features for some time, and during that time we will invest our energy and efforts into replacing the subversion with the Git. And in the second iteration, we would exchange the XJS with the React.js. Well, those would be a big changes, and for many developers, it would need some time to get used to it, even though it may sound like, well, Git is pretty standard these days. In our case, most of the developers were just used to using XJS, and Git was also something new for them, so they would need some time to get used to it. And also, we would have to spend a lot of time proving to people that this will actually work, because it's kind of sounds strange, but they wouldn't believe just like that that we can do this hard cut and it will just work out of the box. So that would need a lot of efforts to make people believe that this will work. So to summarize it, what would be pros and cons of the hard cut when switching the SVN to Git? So definitely advantage would be that probably we could introduce it faster with overall less effort, because we would just say, okay, now we freeze all development for 3 maybe weeks, and we just say, okay, during that time we migrate everything from SVN to Git, train people to use Git instead of SVN, and then just say, okay, now we are fully migrated to Git and we can just use it. Probably if we do it like this, we also get more benefits sooner, something like having code review or CI/CD sooner, which definitely would be an advantage. The disadvantages, however, would be that during that switch, most of the developers would just be blocked, and they would have to stop completely with their development, because few selected people would just be migrating all the source code, and most of the developers would just sit there and wait until the migration is done. That would mean that it would be a huge drop in our velocity, and basically all the features that were planned and promised to customers would have to be postponed. That would be very hard position to explain to the market, especially when customers are used to getting their features very soon, and as mentioned before, are very demanding. So the second idea that we considered was to take the stepwise approach. That would basically mean that we would not communicate to anyone that we plan to switch the core technology, or I mean, we of course could communicate it, but we wouldn't communicate that it means a feature freeze. So that basically would mean that during that time we would still bring new features, maybe a little bit less, but still bring some. The idea was that we would introduce a Git repository that would mirror the SVN repository, and for a limited time, we would have two of them at the same time. That would mean that most of the developers would still be using SVN, but few developers could already approach the source code by the Git, and those two repositories would have been synchronized. Again, advantages in this case would be that customers would not even notice the switch, or almost not notice the switch. Most of the developers could still work on the features and wouldn't really be blocked by the transition because they would not be influenced by the transition being done on the background, basically. Also, one advantage would be that the whole setup could be tested by few people only, and not to block the whole development team, but basically only taking capacity of few people and not endangering the capacity of the whole development team. Also, what would be an advantage is that less time has to be spent for proving that it actually works, as we could easily test it with small costs, just try to set it up, and maybe after 1 or 2 weeks just show that it works, and we don't have to like persuade anyone that it will actually work, because you can just prove it by showing that, yeah, here it is, and it's working in parallel with the SVN. So yeah, there is no, let's say, big danger. Of course, this also would have some disadvantages. So one of them would be that it is some overhead to set up and maintain the synchronized repositories. Basically, anything that you introduce into your setup or system is at some point some overhead, because you have to maintain it. Sometimes something goes wrong, you have to analyze what's wrong and fix it. So it is overall some overhead. At some point, you still need to do the hard cut and basically say, okay, from now on, we only use Git and stop using SVN. But it's definitely much smaller cut if you do it step by step, and if you transfer developer by developer to using the new setup, yeah, then the final hard cut is much smaller. I think overall it would take a bit longer to be fully migrated to Git compared to this hard cut solution, as the idea here was to have the setup run for at least few weeks to test everything out, see if everything works, maybe fine tune it a little bit. So at the end of the day, it would take more weeks, let's say, than doing the hard cut. So those were two ideas, and now let me tell you what solution we came up with and how did we address it eventually. So we decided to take the stepwise approach and not to do the hard cut, mainly because of the market being really challenging for us, and it would have been much bigger business loss if we would have communicate to market that we have to do a freeze cut, and basically that we need to do some cleanup and that we need to introduce some technological debt addressment. So we decided to Google basically and search what is out there, and we found out that there is subgit, which is pretty cool tool, and it's basically meant for keeping the Git and SVN repositories synchronized. So the way how it works, you can see on this diagram. Basically, you have the SVN repository and the Git repository, and via subgit they are synced. What does it mean, or how does it work? Is that subgit lives in the Git repository. It's installed into the standard Git hooks. So, for instance, pre-receive or post-commit, or the hook that is run before you push, and all the other standard Git hooks. And basically, anytime you commit something to Git, those scripts would be run, and they would check if this commit is also already applied in SVN or not. Usually it's not, because it's a new commit. So what would the subgit scripts do is that they would take the Git commits and they would commit them into the SVN repository. That's basically how it's synchronized from the Git side into the SVN side. From the SVN side back to Git side, basically a job is being run that checks for new SVN commits every some time, whatever you configure. In our case, it was something like 60 seconds or something like that. And every time the job runs, it checks if there are some new SVN commits that are not still in the Git. And if there are some, then the SVN's commit would be also translated back to Git. Of course, there is a lot of much more sophisticated work done. So basically, there are also checks for conflicts. There are also checks for merge requests. It supports different branches and stuff like that. So it's much more sophisticated than just this. The good thing about this is that basically, let's say most of the SVN developers had no idea that there is something like that even being run on background. So everyone who was used to approaching the SVN repository, they had no change. They would just, as always, commit and so push and pull basically data from SVN. The Git repository was synchronized on the background, and it wouldn't really interfere with the SVN guys, let's say. What was the idea here was that we basically wanted to win some time for the switch. So we would keep the repository synchronized for multiple weeks. Basically, during that time, only small part of the team would access the source code via Git, and most of them would still use SVN. So let's say out of those 25 or 20 developers, only 3 people actually approached the source code via Git. They tested everything out. They tested all the setup, all the configs, basically did the fine tuning. And once we saw, okay, this is probably running really well, we could get more people using Git and less people using SVN, basically. So 1 or 2 people at the time would switch from SVN to Git. After a week, another 2 people would switch to Git. And basically what happened over time was that less and less people would have been using the SVN, and more and more people would be using Git. Also, since I mentioned that we had some common libraries that have been used by other projects as well, we had to make sure that those external dependencies also have time to align somehow and basically prepare for this change. And by this step-by-step approach, we won some time also for them, because they could have aligned their solutions to also start using Git, and it would not be a hard cut for them, but actually would be also they had enough time to prepare, so they had several weeks. So how did it work, or what actually we achieved? It worked surprisingly well. So during this testing phase, while the new setup was already done, a lot of people were still using SVN, but few people were using Git. We actually were able to fix most of the issues. So we really fine-tuned the whole solution. We were able to set up the pipelines, set up the whole GitLab installation. We were able to set up the code review rules while most of people still were using the SVN. So basically, we had the chance to see if this will work for us or not without influencing most of the development power. Also, what we did after some time was that we redirected the Jenkins jobs not to listen on the SVN hooks, but on the Git commits instead. So basically, after some time, since Git repository and SVN repository were really, let's say, equal, we were able to just transfer the Jenkins from the SVN to listening to Git commits instead of SVN commits. Also, during that, let's say, testing phase, we were able to train people for a new way of working. So it would not be really like a hard cut for them in a mindset kind of thing, but they also had the chance to try it out themselves, to just try the Git instead of SVN. They could also attend some trainings, and yeah, it went really well. So how it ended or what happened? So after we acquired the confidence that this new setup will really work, we decided to fully switch to using only Git. That basically meant that we announced to every developer that, hey, from now on, let's only use Git because it's much more cool. You have much better control over all the commits and merging stuff and code reviews. You have much more freedom to branches, to the merging. It's just so cool. So we said, okay, from now on, let's only use Git. We kept the SVN sync running for a few more weeks, just to make sure that if something went wrong, we still would have backup. Even though nobody was really using it at that time, we still had it for a few weeks. And after some weeks, we really realized that everything runs smoothly. Also, all the dependencies that we had, so the other projects that were using the common libraries, they also were able to switch to Git. So basically we said, okay, we don't really need that synchronization anymore. We don't really need that SVN anymore. So we decided to shut the SVN repo completely. And yeah, from there we run happily on Git, and yeah, we are enjoying all the benefits. So what is the summary of the story, or what is the basically the message that I wanted to share with you is that we probably could have avoided all of this by simply not underestimating the technical debt and actually addressing it on a regular basis. So one piece of advice is to not underestimate the technical debt, even though you may have a challenging market, you may have a challenging customer. It will basically haunt you anyway, and if you don't upgrade the technologies, you will just lose much more time and effort. If you anyway do find yourself in a situation that your technology is too obsolete and you have to switch it somehow, I would definitely advise you to consider the stepwise approach, as the hard cuts usually can be very dangerous, and it can be really hard to communicate to your stakeholders that you need to stop introducing new features for 1 month or something like that, and that you have to do some housekeeping, because most of them will not understand why you have to do it. So if you do find yourself in such situation, consider stepwise approach and do not do the hard cut. And as always, for many cases, really good tools are already available that may help you solve your issue. For a very small time span, we considered implementing some custom solution for this SVN and Git synchronization. But fortunately, we have decided to use a tool which is already existing and not really develop something new. So for many cases, really good tools are already available, and that they will probably help you solve your issues. So Google for them, search for them, and try to apply them. And yeah, I think that would be all from my presentation. Thanks a lot for your time, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Filip. That was wonderful. I understood something, and that means a lot for me. Listen, but you showed those two approaches. I would go for the hard cut. I'm like this. Like I know it's a big team. The clients are waiting. But let's just do it. Let's just switch. I love it. Didn't you think about that for just a couple of seconds?
Yeah. So we thought, but we just identified that the risk would be too big, and we didn't want to risk the good name of the product. So
how big is the team here? How big, I can't imagine like how big of thing were you switching? How many people are on the team? How many products? How many things are in the repositories?
Mm-hmm. So currently we have more than 35 developers.
Oh, okay. So it's not like 5 guys in the room. Like guys, let's do it now. It's gonna be okay. Let's stay up with pizza and Coca-Cola until 4 o'clock in the morning, and we'll manage. So it's
unfortunately
bigger.
Not. It's bigger, yes.
And people have families; they just don't want to stay there until 2 o'clock, like when we were 17, right?
Exactly, not anymore.
This work-life balance destroys everything. But
yes.
So you chose the step-by-step approach, and 35 people, and okay. And how big is the repository?
So it was more than 2 gigabytes of source code, I believe. And by source code, I mean plain text. So imagine that you had, I don't know, 40 documents bigger than 2 gigabytes. So not videos and pictures, but just the source code. It's
Wow,
quite a lot.
That is really cool. Okay. Overall, what was the, we have a question from somebody. Sorry, I arrived later. What was the background for change from SVN to Git? Why did you use SVN in the first place?
That's a good question. And actually, the answer is simple. 15 years ago or 20 years ago, it sounded like a good idea. And perhaps there was not even any different option. And this was really something historical that we just had. So
it happened a long time ago in a galaxy far away when computers were called PC and were made by IBM. Okay, overall, what was the biggest challenge when migrating from SVN to Git? Like, I can imagine a lot of, I just started programming and I don't understand the Git, and somebody sends me some command lines and I just write them down, and I understand that there is a lot of things happening inside the Git. This is live, this is not live, this is waiting, this is pre-production. But what was the biggest challenge to move from one to another?
That's a good question. Actually, I think a lot of people would say that it was like a technological challenge, but actually I found the biggest issue, or the hardest thing, was the mindset, actually. Since most of the people worked with the project for some time, they would say, okay, why do you want to change something that is still working? I mean, SVN works, why to change it? So one of the hardest things, I think, for me was the mindset of people, and actually make them understand why you want to use technology which is up to date and not 20 years ago, 20 years.
And how did you achieve that? Like, did you go, took everybody for a big lunch and did a presentation?
Very challenging.
But what did you do? How did you achieve
kind
it?
Of. Kind of. So yeah, we spent a lot of time discussing on coffees and lunch breaks to explain why the Git is better. But at the end, we just showed it. So we just said, okay, hey, let's do it. Let's show how it could work, and let's show you the real benefits. There is probably nothing better than just showing the solution working.
Okay. If you would do the transition again, would you do something differently? Hard fork.
Probably not really.
Oh, this is like, I did it. Good management. I liked my job, and everything was done perfectly. I wouldn't change anything.
Yeah, not really. I mean, some minor issues we could have communicated much better, but overall, I think the point is that the stepwise approach was a good.
I'm gonna be honest. The connection is not very good. I can't hear very well, but
can you hear me now?
Yes, now perfect. Can you quit the Warzone and downloads and just stop the torrents for a second, please?
Yeah. Sorry, I'm hitting the cancel button now.
Okay, we didn't hear the answer. So what would you do differently? You said one thing could be made differently. But we're really lucky because we heard the presentation that was running well. Right now, I see you smiling on the screen, and it's really beautiful smile, but we cannot hear anything. And we have 5 more minutes, so let's take a look at the questions. I'm sorry about that. We have a question from a viewer. Why was SVN not enough anymore? Just because it was an old technology? I think that there's some 60-year-old guy sitting there who's working with SVN since 1995. And he's like, what's wrong about SVN? Tell me. So what was it?
So first question, Jano, to you. Can you hear me now, or is it better?
Yes. You stopped the downloads and now it's working.
Yeah. Okay. You were right. So good question. Why wasn't SVN good enough anymore? Well, the reason was that, for instance, we did not have a code review at all. So SVN as a tool wasn't really supportive if it comes to code reviews. also our the continuous integration and delivery pipelines, we couldn't really set them up efficiently because there was no easy way to just do the code review and build and static source code analysis. So most of the time, I would say the reason for us was the code review.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, nice. I think that question is answered. And from what you said, this wasn't such a big software or coding problem as it was the relationships and people problem. That's what I understand from. So what would you recommend to the next teams who you said we shouldn't be avoiding the transition? If you see the technology is getting old, do it as soon as possible. But what's the next step? Bring everybody on board and tell them, or just try to do it without anybody knowing and just letting them know if it's like crucial and there's nothing else to do. So what would we recommend?
So I would say that the communication is the key, definitely. So you should not hide from anyone. You should transparently admit that, okay, we have some technological debt, we should address it. What I would recommend is to actually adopt the continuous improvement mindset. So especially in Scrum, it's very simple because the framework itself really forces you to do continuous improvements because you have those iterations, and at the end of each iteration, you just look back and think of what can you improve. So if I could suggest, do the continuous improvements and never let them, go away. So always focus on continuous improvements.
So just make it, and is it possible to make it part of the Scrum? Like, listen, guys, we are going to update the product. And by the way, with it together, we're going to update the technology we are working with.
I think you have to, yeah. I think you have to make it transparent to the stakeholders and product owners that you cannot always only bring features, but at the same time, it's like with a car. You buy a new car, but you still need to do some maintenance, even if it's new. So you have to change the oil, you have to change the brake, blah, blah, blah. So you have to think about the maintenance anyway. And you could, for a limited time, skip the maintenance, but it will come back to you later, with much bigger price.
Okay, I think our time's up and we can switch to our next speaker. Filip, that was really cool. I understood 40% of what you said, but I think there are a lot of people who are going through something like this before. And I know I switched to Windows 11 now, and it was like with shaky hands and sweaty armpits. I was like, okay, let's do this. And it's just me and my computer. And the biggest problem is if I will be able to play Warzone. So I think you have bigger problems at your company. So if somebody is asking, the Warzone is working with Windows 11, so you can switch. Thank you, Filip. See you later. Have a good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you, same to you. Bye.
Bye.